for two. Kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two. Sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this. Multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past any and all, I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking. So what are we talking? What kind of alignment? And running it deep, even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping. And woo! This is the armchair, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, guys, and welcome to the Texas Fantasy League Personal League Podcast. I am your host, Jeff Lambert. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77, and we are here tonight to break down your 12-team league. And with me tonight, we'll go ahead and meet the panel here. We have Mr. Brian Ford. He is the co-host of the Dynasty Saturday Night 5 right here on Going for Two Live, also a host of the Dynasty Fever podcast. You can find him on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. What's up, Brian?
Hey, how we doing? Happy to do another PLP for a league with a very creative name of simply Texas. So Texas. I was told that we're not supposed to mess with Texas, but we'll see.
Also joining us tonight, Mr. Shane. He is the host of the Red Zone Redemption, and he's also the creator of the Poly Playoffs charity leagues. You can follow him at FFShaneB. What's up, Shane?
Do you know my last name?
I do know your last name.
Here. That's for you guys. In Texas forever.
That's good stuff. So, Shane, real quick, just give us a quick Red Zone Redemption. When can they find it? Where can they find it?
Yeah, so if you don't already follow Red Zone Redemption, you're probably not annoyed with me. If you do, you probably are annoyed with me because I've been cutting up all the audio from the podathon that we did for Poly's Playoff. So first 15, well, really the 15 episodes from that are out on Spotify, Google, Apple, you name it. And then usually Red Zone Redemption will be a weekly podcast covering fantasy football and occasionally dipping into a little bit of faith if the person that I have on wants to talk about that. If not, we'll stick to football.
Good stuff. And Brian, I know, of course, the Saturday Night 5 comes on Saturdays here on Going for Two Live. And then the Dynasty Fever podcast, where can you find that at?
Yeah, so that's an audio-only podcast at Dynasty Fever Pod on Twitter. We usually record on Wednesdays, and the episodes will drop like Thursday or Friday. Yeah,
good stuff. All right, guys, as I mentioned at the top, we're here to break down your 12-team league and explain how this goes in case you don't know. I gave these guys your team rosters, and they ranked them from 12 to 1, with 12 being the team they'd least want to take over and 1 being the team they would most want to take over. And from that, we created a consensus ranking, which we'll count down tonight. These guys were also given 6 teams each to break down. So when we get to that team in the countdown, we will count them down. And before I get to that, I do want to mention real quick that the Going for Two League Personal League podcast have sold out for this year. Obviously, we're a week from the season, but we have a special right now. If you want to order yours for next week or next year, it's goingfor2.com/PLP. Use promo code earlybird24 and save 20%. It makes it about $7 a person in the 12-team league. So increase your entry fee by $7 each, and you can get this again goingfor2.com/PLP. Use earlybird24, and I will say they are selling out. We already sold out the whole month of July, and part of June's already sold as well. So please, if you want to get in quickly. All right, let's go ahead and jump right into the countdown.
Number 12.
Number 12 team ranked as high as 11 and as low as 12, and it is Hanging with Hernandez. And Shane, this is your squad here.
Yes, it is. So I should have given you a bonus point for name creativity because I don't know, this one just sticks with me. I really think what ultimately did this team in for me was your QB and your tight end. In a 1 QB league, I can see where you can punt the quarterback position. I don't think your team was good enough to punt the quarterback position. I know this is a keeper league. So if you, and I can't remember if you kept Purdy or not. But either way, Brock Purdy, I don't think is good enough to be your only QB on this roster with the talent that you do have. Dameon Pierce looking like a good player with, well, not good player, but looks like he's got a good situation. Houston didn't really bring anybody in to compete with him. I like Kenneth Walker, but with the Charbonnet draft pick, he's just become a headache. Devontae Adams is still a top 5 receiver in the league. Garrett Wilson has a ton of upside with Aaron Rodgers. I'm not a huge Chig guy just because I don't know what to do with passing options in that offense. Even DeAndre Hopkins, like I'm not really sure. The only one I've been buying really this offseason has been Treylon Burks. You've actually got some decent depth on your bench, but yeah, it was Purdy and Chig that just kind of scared me away. And I don't know if you have someone that can truly finish as an RB1 with this squad. It'll be close with a couple of guys, but it's not. I love running backs, and this is not necessarily a team that I am excited about, even though you have a lot of them.
Yeah, it looks like his keepers were Devontae Adams and Kenneth Walker.
Okay.
So, I'm not sure when they had to mark their keepers. Kenneth Walker's situation obviously changed after the draft.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that, he took him after the draft, but Adams is a pretty good keeper, I think. And
you've got Deontay, Mike Evans, and Marvin Mims on your bench. You've got a ton of receiver depth. I would try and package some of that to go get a better quarterback. Like, you don't even have to do that big of a package, but another team coming up has Geno Smith as their QB2. Kenny Pickett's a QB2 in this league. Jared Goff's a QB2. Stafford. Like, there's some QBs that you could go and trade for with various packages, and that's probably one of the first moves I would make.
Yeah, I would say that's probably the weak spot. And I guess in a one quarterback league, if you're going to be weak somewhere, be weak at quarterback because they are a little bit easier to replace. Brian, what are your thoughts here on this team?
Yeah, I think Shane pretty much covered it. I'm not a huge Purdy fan, period. And the thing about one QB leagues, as Shane said, is on the one hand, you can maybe punt, stream, bob and weave, figure it out. On the other hand, in one QB leagues, having that stud or really elevates you because when you go against a Mahomes or an Allen or a Hurts or
you got to have somebody to match that, right?
Yeah, and if you don't, then you're really just giving it away, every week. So sometimes it's really super important to have that stud in a one QB. Adams, we've got age there, we've got Jimmy G. Not a big drop down from Derek Carr, but he's already barking about how he's upset. I hate the Raiders as an organization. I hate their coach. Who knows what's going to happen there? Garrett Wilson could, I love the guy, but, Rodgers is Rodgers. He could lean on Lazard and Cobb and, and Dalvin Cook for, the first couple of weeks while he really grows trust with Garrett Wilson. There's just a lot of ways that this can go badly. Honestly, like I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold is starting in San Francisco by week, 13. But everybody knows I'm down on Purdy, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm not big on Purdy in fantasy. Now, obviously, I'm a little biased because I'm a 49ers fan. I do think in that offense he can win games, and I think he can be an NFL quarterback. However, in fantasy, I do worry about him. I think it's going to be very conservative. He's not going to give you those week winning games that a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes could give you.
Yeah.
He's just going to be a quarterback that you're just going to plug in. He should be a streaming quarterback in a one quarterback league, in my opinion.
And I don't kind of to your point there too, Jeff, he may not win you games in fantasy, but I don't know, and this may be because of the system, if he's ever going to have those games where he just absolutely bombs and loses you a game either. He's not going to have a Kirk Cousins, negative 24 points.
Right. They won't let him pass that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get to team number 11.
Number 11.
Number 11 team ranked as high as 9 and as low as 10, and it is DBT Kirkwood. And Brian, this is your squad. Take it away.
Yeah, so I think there's some very good starters here. I just philosophically, I'm going to say this a lot tonight. I like running back depth. I like to be lean and mean at wide receiver and then have running back depth. And that doesn't mean that I pay up for having 100 really good running backs. In fact, quite the opposite. I like to stock my bench with like injury away guys, pass catchers, guys like that. But so I don't like the running back depth here. I also don't like that you're carrying a bench defense. Like, first of all, I don't even really believe in using kickers in defense, but that's a whole other story. But you're burning a bench spot by having a bench DST. And honestly, you're a Steelers fan. Please stop it. You have Pickett, Jalen Warren, Pickens, and you're stashing the Steelers defense on your bench. Like, this is Homer behavior, and you need to stop. So for if you're just listening in audio, we've got Hurts and Pickett at quarterback. We've got CMC, Aaron Jones, and Jalen Warren at running back. We've got Waddle, Amari Cooper, Pickens, Nico, Juju, Zay Jones at receiver. Higbee and Dulcich are the tight ends. The keepers were Hurts and CMC. It's not tight end premium, so maybe it means you don't need a second tight end. It also means that they don't have a lot of trade value. I would maybe move a tight end or a wide receiver. I know you probably love Juju because he was once a Steeler, but maybe package Juju and Higbee or Juju and Dulcich and see what you can do to add to that running back depth, because the thing is, like, CMC, he's aging. Aaron Jones is definitely aging. And there's a world in which, things just don't go well in Green Bay. And, they figure, listen, we're probably going to just, hand it over to AJ Dillon, things can go wrong there, So I think Nico is a really good sleeper. So if you are going to trade him, you're probably going to want to wait for him to pop off like a few weeks into the season. Higbee could be a target machine, especially now with Kupp gone. So you might want to see, like, if Kupp's going to miss like the first couple weeks and Higbee has like an 11 target game or something in the first week, maybe that's the guy you move and just you'll figure out tight end. You can stream tight end. And going into next year, if you end the year with Jalen Waddle, I want him to be one of your keepers along with Hurts. I really don't think we should be keeping running backs, especially running backs of CMC's age. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good call. And one thing I wanted to say, too, is that this is a keeper league, and, we're ranking these in order we want to take them over. But I think overall, this league is fairly flat. I know we do a lot of dynasty leagues where, like, these bottom two teams are like you would never see Christian McCaffrey and Jalen Hurts on a dynasty team at the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
So I think some of these teams that we're ranking towards the end, they make one or two moves in season or have one of those guys that are on their bench that are kind of flyers. If one of those guys pop and have a breakout season, their season can totally change in a minute.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff, because, like, for me, there was maybe 4 or 5 teams that I really, really liked and pushed those up. But then I went through the teams a second time and I was like, this team's still really good. Like, they should be higher, but I've got to rank people at certain numbers. And it was just the way the cards fell. Like, there were good teams that I still feel like I ended up pushing back because I liked other teams better.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jalen Hurts, Jalen Waddle, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones. I mean, that's a
solid squad.
Yeah.
I struggle too, and we'll agree that it's a relatively, flat league. I also think that since the rosters are small, which I had, like, my chest got tight seeing how small the rosters were, there's the waiver wire is gonna be bountiful, unlike in a lot of leagues. I don't know if in this league you can trade draft picks, like in some keeper leagues, but that's an option too. And I don't have access to your draft picks on this spreadsheet. So if you can trade draft picks, obviously that's a whole other conversation that comes into how you're going to improve these teams. But I agree. It's almost like every team is in the playoff chase in this league.
Agreed, 100%. All right, let's get to number 10.
Number 10.
Number 10 team ranked as high as 6 and as low as 12. A very big disparity here between this team. It is the Big Green. And Shane, this is your squad.
I would have liked this team a little better if they named it the Big Green Egg. Brian, I do have a question for you. Are you a Tua believer?
I'm generally, I would say I used to be higher than market, but I think I think either the market's caught up or maybe I've soured a little bit with the concussions, and I think I'm pretty much at the median when it comes to the market.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's like my quarterback 10 in Dynasty. Yeah.
Nice. I was just curious because we were very different on this one.
Yeah.
I love this starting lineup, but I'm also super in on Najee. I know Jeff is too. I've not been on Cam Akers typically, but with the way that their offseason has gone, not bringing it, they brought in Zach Evans, and that was pretty much it. Sony Michel retired. I still have faith in Kyren Williams taking some kind of role, but Cam Akers has been kind of a screaming value to me this offseason. And so I think that combined with the wide receivers and Njoku, plus you've got one of the best kickers in the league, potentially one of the best defenses in the league, I really, really liked the starting lineup for this team. The depth isn't great, but Montgomery was brought in as a free agent, paid pretty decently. I think they're going to use him, I feel like, a little bit more than people expect. Khalil Herbert, I don't know what's going to happen in that backfield, so you've got a chance at a starter. That's great. Isaiah Spiller is one guy that I've been targeting a lot as a deeper kind of sleeper, if you will, because if Eckler goes down, I think Spiller can actually come in and surprise people. Gallup and DPJ are great depth pieces at wide receiver. They're never going to crack your starting lineup except for bye weeks and maybe injuries. So maybe package them together to go improve that or go a little more go for broke style, if you will, with a better receiver or a better running back. But I really like this team, and they landed at 6 just because some other teams ended up pushing them down.
Yeah, I'm a big Tua guy. I've been higher on Tua. Even last year, I was higher on Tua, and when he started off the season the way he did, I was basically doing my victory lap. And then, of course, injuries strike, and he goes downhill from there. But as long as he's healthy, I think he's an amazing quarterback, and you get him at a great value right now. Najee Harris, another guy that's got a lot of hate, that had a really good season last year that no one realizes how good his season actually was. If you divided it in half, the second half of the season, he was like RB6 or RB7. Cam Akers, I think, was mentioned in the chat by Jamie. He was a top 5 running back last year towards the end of the season. If he sees that kind of usage this year, which there's no reason to think that he wouldn't, he'll also be a solid player. So again, this team has got some good pieces to work with, and the fact that it was ranked as high as 6 and as low as 12th tells you really all you need to know about this team as far as where it could be as far as range of outcomes. Brian, you had him at 12. What was your biggest beef with this team?
Yeah, I'm looking through that, and I'm thinking. I think it was just like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like a bunch of little things, nothing glaring, but a bunch of little things. I am definitely not a Najee guy. Akers could go either way. Tyreek, obviously, love him, but aging. He already said there's a retirement window there. I'm skeptical on DJ Moore and how high he can climb with Fields. Like I definitely have raised him in my rankings from where I had him a couple months ago. Like I'm starting to warm up to it, but I just think there's a cap to how much that volume can really increase. And even if he's hyper targeted, like I just don't see him. Like he is what he is. Like he's DJ Moore. He's going to be like a high end wide receiver too. He's not going to crack a lot of touchdowns.
More than 4 touchdowns though, right?
Who knows, man? Who knows? Njoku, I like, but like that could go either way. Like he's my dynasty tight end 10. I do like him, but there's a world in which Elijah Moore takes a lot of targets, or for some reason they decide to give Chubb 400 carries. Like it just
please, my Scott Fishbowl team would be so happy.
I've already got. I mean, I've had Dotson above McLaurin in dynasty for months.
I knew I liked you, Brian.
McLaurin's a classic underachiever. I don't really look at the kickers in defense, so maybe that's why. I'm lower on Geno than most people. I think Montgomery could end up being your best running back. Spiller, I think is basically on his way to being irrelevant. I think if Eckler goes down, Joshua Kelly will get touches. Elijah Dotson will catch passes, and Spiller could be the odd man out. I kind of like Gallup. I tend to like Gallup better than most people. But when you said Gallup and DPJ are great depth pieces at wide receiver, I thought. Like that's the opposite of what I thought. With rosters so shallow, I want to see better wide receivers on depth. And then you're carrying a second tight end. Well, yeah. And you're carrying a second tight end, which, is kind of useless, but and it's a starter who we don't know much about. I do like Ferg Daddy. I'm optimistic on him, but but Schoonmaker could be the starter there in a few weeks, or they're splitting it, and it's a headache. So I just think it was just like a thousand little things where I was like, there's too much that can go wrong with this team.
Yeah, fair enough. And I want to quickly get your idea and some philosophy here as far as how they built their team. What are your thoughts, Shane, on stacking in this case with the one quarterback in a sort of a redraft? I know, like, in best ball it's popular, in DFS it's popular, but the Tua and the Tyreek Hill stack. What are your thoughts on doing that in a league like this?
I have no problems with it. I try to stack where I can. The league format doesn't necessarily push me one way or the other. So yeah, if I can get a stack, then I'm going to. But I'm not going to go for broke and force it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am with these kind of leagues too. Is that you don't force it. If I get to a point where obviously they probably took Tyreek Hill first, and then I'm looking at two quarterbacks that are sort of in the same tier for me, and I already have Tyreek Hill, then it might push me more towards Tua in that case. But I'm not going to reach for it to try to get the stack. This is a good stack to have, obviously, too. If Tua stays healthy with Tyreek, there are some stacks that I've seen in leagues that you don't necessarily want to have, but I think Tua and Tyreek Hill is one of those ones you definitely want to have. All right, let's get to number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 team ranked as high as 7 and as low as 9. And Brian, this is your team, and it is Devastator.
Yeah, I think Devastator was probably a little devastated with the JT news. I did these rankings before, the poop really hit the fan with JT. I would probably push them lower than 7 now, given that. Because what happened with JT was the worst possible scenario.
It was, really.
Right? Like, for us as far as fantasy goes, right? We're guaranteed 4 games without him. We have a bad relationship which can drag this thing out. They're probably, in some ways, less likely to trade him, at least for a little while, because now no team's going to give up anything for a guy who's missing 4 weeks, really. And they were already asking for too much. And, this could get ugly where he basically plays only a few weeks to get showcased around the trade deadline or enough to make the contract not, was it toll, not toll. So he accrues a year and you're getting almost nothing out of him. And his trade value now is cratering. So what are you going to do? It's almost like you're burning a roster spot because you're not going to drop JT, right? So you just kind of got to hold on to him. But good news is, really good running backs besides JT. So I think for the most part, we have solid starters and good depth on this team. I think it's a team that's in the middle that could go, towards the top with a few tweaks. You're in trouble with JT. Gabe Davis, he's hated so much that now he's a value, but he's not great as a wide receiver too in a league like this. And your quarterbacks are, meh. We've got Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy G. Who knows? Rodgers might have a good year or 2 left, but he had 0 with rushing. He plays at a slow pace. He's going to be a high-end QB2, at best, and he's 75 years old. Plus, I just hate him as a human being. So I see him and I'm like, ew. But you do have Jacobs. His situation got straightened out. Pollard, love Pollard this year. I'm part of that hype train. Algiers a really good injury away running back. Singletary, I'm kind of back and forth on. For a little while in the offseason, I thought he's going to be better than people think. He's going to take more from Dameon Pierce than people think. In the preseason, they've experimented with, using Dameon Pierce on all 3 downs. We'll see. It's the preseason. Teams experiment. So your wide receivers, DK, Gabe, Sutton, Lazard, and Boyd. I don't know that I like DK as my 1. I especially don't like him as my 1 if Gabe's my 2. And then your tight end kind of might soothe that a little bit because Waller is essentially going to be a wide receiver. They're going to pepper him with targets. And they got a promising rookie Mayer on the bench. So you've got some good stuff going on. I think you just kind of got to eat it with JT because, like, in keeper leagues, there's no real like rebuilders, where you can just say, all right, I'm going to offload him to somebody who can afford to have him only play for 5 weeks and get something for him that could help me this year. That's more common in a full on dynasty. So I'd like to see you address your wide receivers a bit. Although Waller's pretty much going to produce at wide receiver level at that position. So I don't want you to overpay for anybody. Like, the first few weeks with Judy out, Sutton could be something, and then that hole is filled for a little while. But I think at some point you're probably going to want to address the wide receivers a little bit. So yeah, maybe somebody likes Mayer, I know you got that hot Jimmy G Mayer stack, but you might want to split that up. Yeah.
That's one of those stacks you don't want to have. Yeah, what really hurts too is you look at his keepers, and one of his keepers was Jonathan Taylor. So that really hurts. And I mean, he did end up with Josh Jacobs, so you probably got him at a value because at that time they didn't know if he was going to be playing or not this year. So that kind of helped a little bit. But yeah, that JT keeper, it really hurts. And you're talking about getting ugly, and you mentioned it a little bit here, but I don't know if the league knows this. But if they were to not activate JT for some reason and keep him on the pup the entire season, his year on his contract does not accrue, meaning he's still under contract next year. It does not accrue in a year. So that would be
Jim Irsay is the type of jackrabbit that would do that.
Exactly what I was going to say. He would be the kind of person that would just say, you know what, you want to play this game, we're going to feed you on pup, and you're not going to accrue an entire year. So something to kind of keep an eye on. Anything you wanted to pop in here, Shane, on this team?
Just because Brian does mention he doesn't look at the defenses or the kickers, you've got the best defense. And I'm not throwing shade at you, Brian. It's just like I know a little bit more just because I play a ton of IDP. The Eagles' defense I think is going to be one of the best in the league this year. So you've got that going for you. And kind of to Brian and Jeff's point, I would maybe try and package like a Sutton and a Lazard or Sutton and Davis or something like that to go improve that wide receiver room. Go get a tier up.
Yeah, agreed. And Dwayne in the chat said that the NFLPA would probably sue if they did that to JT. I don't think it comes to that. I agree. I don't think it comes to that. I was just kind of throwing it out there if they were to play that hardball with him. That his
real quick. Sorry, Shane. They did say in the chat that they can trade draft picks. So that kind of that makes it now a whole other when we're talking about packaging Sutton Sutton in a second or Sutton in whatever for. To go get that wide receiver. Now your options are expanded. Your menu is bigger.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to what are we on? Team number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 team was ranked. Pretty big disparity here. Ranked as high as 4 and as low as 11. And Shane, this is your squad, and this team is pretty interesting name here. 2 boobs, 2 balls, 1 goal.
Well, I know it was on your mind when you were making your team name. Yeah, so this is one of those that I mentioned earlier that was kind of the victim of there were a lot of teams kind of in that middle that I liked, but ended up having to push people down. And that's kind of why I had them at 11. I'm not the biggest Ramondre Stevenson fan, and I've been a well-known James Conner hater because he unfortunately is made of glass. And then your depth on your bench does not excite me at all. And you've got Taysom Hill. And if you have paid any attention to any of the PLPs or my podcast or Twitter, I hate Taysom Hill. Like, I don't understand what blackmail he has on the New Orleans Saints front office, but it's something. And so that's another bit for another day. But this team is probably better than I've ranked them, but based on like wanting to take them over, it's a bit lower. I do love that you've got Javonte as your RB3. I've actually not been a Javonte guy, but I've been picking him up and drafting him in leagues as my RB3 pretty comfortably, because the way I see it is Javonte is not going to be the Javonte that we expect at the beginning of the year, because usually it takes a full year for people to recover from their ACL injuries. So I'm expecting really around mid-year that Javonte is back to the Javonte that everyone's expecting. So if you've got him as your RB3, your flex in this case, you're not necessarily hurting for him and dying for him to have that upper echelon of performances that you're expecting. That's pretty much all I got, Jeff.
Yeah, I think with Javonte Williams, is patience is the key here, because I think you probably took him with the thought process that he would be brought along slowly. So don't, 3 games into the season, 4 games into the season when he's not hitting what you want, don't panic and sell him. Hold on to him, because I will go back to week 2 of the preseason. He had 12 snaps, and in those 12 snaps, he had 8 opportunities, which means it tells me that once they get ready to use him full time, he's going to be used in the passing game. He's going to be used a lot in the running game. So I have him in a lot of my leagues. And I think eventually he's going to be really good this year. Just have patience with him. I actually like Ramondre Stevenson. I think the same thing, with him, as far as we were talking about Cam Akers not having a whole lot of competition there. I know Zeke is there, and Zeke may steal a few touchdowns, but I don't think it's going to be enough that it's really going to hurt Ramondre Stevenson's value. AJ Brown, Drake London, it's a great 1-2 combo. Josh Allen, you can't get much better than that. So overall, I kind of like this team. Brian, you had this team ranked pretty high here at 4. What are your thoughts on this team?
Well, I mean, we've got Josh Allen, like a top 3 quarterback. Ramondre, I love. He's like a top 10 dynasty running back for me. Connor, okay, yeah. I mean, he's James Conner, but he's gonna eat this year. I know we don't love to say, oh, let's lean into projectable volume, but there is nothing going on there, and they're going to run him into the ground. The only risk you have is that if they do feed him, that means there's more carries where he can get hurt, or they might say, at the end of the year, screw it, let's see what we have in Keontae Ingram, who, by the way, is one of my, has been a my guy for a while. You should grab him. I don't like cuffing your own running backs. This might be a case where maybe you do it. You've got AJ Brown and London at wide receiver. I mean, that's really good. I think London might be the beneficiary rather than Pitts, but either way, there's going to be hyper concentration of the targets into 2 guys, and so if you have a big piece of the small pie, that's adequate. You have a top 5 to 7 tight end in Kittle. Javonte's okay. I'm kind of off him in redraft this year, and to me, keepers redraft plus, but at the same time, I like him in general. I like him. I loved him coming out. So I think by next year, he's going to be really, really good. Jared Goff, he's like a part-time player. You can't really play him on the road, especially outdoors.
Well, and
but
you don't
at the
need
same
him
time,
with Josh Allen.
Yeah. At the same time, though, he's a trade chip, and he's in a high-powered offense that he's throwing at Amon-Ra St. Brown all the time, Jahmyr Gibbs. You got Rashad Penny, who, I think people kind of sleep on a little bit because of his injury past. And, he could be really, really explosive as the, on the early downs and be a guy that can contribute on a bye week or if somebody gets hurt. You got a fairly good contingency upside running back in Damian Harris, who, we think is probably going to get some of the high value touches at the goal line on that team. Christian Kirk is a really good, wide receiver 3. Elijah Moore, I'm high on this year. He's a really good wide receiver 4. Rashee Rice, I'm very mixed on him. You don't really need him at this point. I'd like to see you turn him into a running back. And I'm very much against Taysom Hill as well. I hate Taysom Hill. However, the reason we hate him is because he gets used. Right, when we think he shouldn't. But I do think this is the year that you're going to start to see, Jawan Johnson and Foster Moreau there. But I think you're also maybe going to see him used less in that Taysom package at the goal line, because they've got Jamal Williams and they've got Kendre Miller, who are bangers. And so that might be a useless piece right there. I'd like to see you turn at least one of Rice and Hill into a running back. But otherwise, I love this team.
Yeah, solid team, top to bottom. I like it. All right, let's get to number 7.
Number 7.
Number 7 team ranked as high as 5, as low as 8, and it is Math is King. Brian, this is your team.
Yeah. So as a history teacher, I will disagree with your team name. But I like this team. So Ayuk for me is a flag plant this year. I've got him well above Debo. I love him this year.
As do I.
Henry is old, and there's meh RB depth on this team. I think you need a better RB2 than Dalvin Cook for sure. I want to see a better wide receiver 3 or flex than Mike Williams, but it's really possible that he pops off this year. The thing is, the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, is going to want to push it downfield more. Mike Williams is going to benefit from that when he's on the field, but also he could be a cap casualty next year. I think they can cut him and save a lot of money. And with Quentin Johnson there, he might be the guy. He might be the odd man out. So he doesn't have any like keeper retention value there. There's really no need to really roster Thielen in a league with rosters this small. I know there's some buzz that he's going to be some reliable target for the rookie quarterback, but I don't know. He's kind of washed. I think you've got the right idea with the number of RBs that you have. I like that roster construction. However, the depth guys could be better considering the roster size in this league. I think you can find some good guys out there, maybe on the waiver wire or in the trade market. You don't really need 2 tight ends or a bench defense. So your quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, love it. Stafford, again, it's a 1 QB league and he's old, but once Kupp comes back, he'll probably produce better than people think. Running backs are Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, who was the lone keeper on this team. I don't know how some teams have 1 keeper, some teams have 2 or 3. Like I don't know how that works. I like Pirine and Zeke as sort of Pirine. I think can have some standalone value. Zeke definitely contingency upside. CEH, it's going to be a rotation there. He's going to get touches, but I just think collectively from like after Derrick Henry, I want you to have better running backs, especially like a running back 2. So I think you need to work on that. Wide receivers, Devontae Smith and Ayuk, love them both. I don't like having my top 2 wide receivers though both be like wide receiver 1Bs on their team. So that's a slight concern there, but I'm kind of splitting hairs there. I love Freiermuth this year. I think Freiermuth is going to maybe surprise some people. And I think he's gonna go off this year. Hunter Henry, as much as whatever, it's Hunter Henry. They brought in Gesicki, but they're still seeing Hunter Henry as the reliable red zone target. He could be a trade chip after he gets maybe a couple touchdowns early in the season. So all in all, I want you to address running backs and probably the back end of your wide receivers, but I don't see much that you have to trade from. So you might have to dip into a little bit of that draft capital. Otherwise, I think you're kind of destined for the middle. But again, like we said, a couple things break right. Almost any of these teams are in the hunt. Yeah,
agreed. And the fact that he has Brandon Ayuk currently sitting on his bench, like it's a good luxury to have because I'm like you. Brandon Ayuk is the receiver 1 there as far as I'm concerned. I'm a Niners fan too, so I love Debo, but Ayuk is the one you want. And word in camp is he's been completely unguardable. So Ayuk.
I love Brandon Ayuk. I think I said it last offseason, either on a PLP or on my show, that I think Brandon Ayuk is actually a better, like, true to the word wide receiver than Debo is. I think Debo is maybe a better athlete, better weapon, but Ayuk, if you just want like pure wide receiver play, is the better guy for me.
Yep, agreed. Anything else you want to say on this team, Shane?
I think what probably pushed them a little higher for me was I'm in love with Trevor Lawrence, have been for a while. And then Zeke, I think there's some touchdown upside. And CEH, I just wanted to mention this is on a contract year, so I'm hoping that he maybe lives up to the hype of what we were hoping for CEH. Now, I don't think the full ceiling will be reached with that, but I do think he'll be playing a little harder. Trying to get a contract, maybe not even with the Chiefs, maybe somewhere else.
Yeah, good call. And just going back on your Trevor Lawrence love, just real quick, you once traded a ton of picks to me to get Trevor Lawrence.
You're gosh darn right I did, because I was trying to go Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence in a Superflex startup, and I literally texted Jay Felicio. I was like, hey, watch this. And like 2 picks before me, your old butt took Trevor Lawrence in front of me. I was pissed.
Yes, and I think that those draft picks and helped me win that league as well because that
Yeah.
worked out pretty well for me.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get to team number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 team, pretty large disparity here. As high as 2, as low as 10. It is Eggcorn. And Shane, you had them at 2, so tell me why you like this team so much.
Jeff, do I do the bit first? You see the player on the roster.
So, I do see it. So how in the heck did you have him so high?
Okay, if you guys don't know, I hate Deshaun Watson. He's a despicable human being. I'll leave it at that. I love this team, though. Dak Prescott, love him. Travis Etienne, love him. DeAndre Swift, I think people are kind of sleeping on him because of the injuries. I think Philly will be a gross 3-headed running back, but he's the best running back in that 3-headed running back room to me. Then you've got Jamar Chase and Stephon Diggs as your wide receivers. Holy cow. And then Debo is your wide receiver 3. I know we kind of just like crapped on him a little bit, but I think he's got some room for some positive regression to closer to what we've seen of Debo. I don't think that's wide receiver 3 levels of Debo from a couple years ago, but I do think it's closer to what we're expecting. Then you've got Dalton Kincaid and Gerald Everett. Kincaid, I'm not super high on, but the potential is there, and you've got a backup plan in Gerald Everett, who I do think is going to hit in the as late as you probably got him. It's stealing. Then you've got really good depth on your bench. I'll include Deshaun Watson in that because if he gets back to what he was in Houston, you can alternate between Dak and Deshaun as you kind of see fit. Brian Robinson has a chance to be the 1A in a backfield. Raheem Mostert, just had a glow up this week. Jeff Wilson out, A-Chain with the shoulder injury, and JT didn't get traded there. Raheem Mostert is wheels up for me. Then you've got some insurance with the Baltimore receiving corps as a potential flex candidate with Rashad Bateman or Zay Flowers. And I think, I've said this a couple times in the last few weeks, I do not have enough of Zay Flowers. That kid is slippery and is going to be open all the freaking time. And that is what you want in a fantasy receiver because they will be your quarterback's best friend. So top to bottom, I really, really like this roster. And I guess the favoritism of Travis Etienne is probably what propelled me over the hate for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and I too am on Zay Flowers. I think it was way back in February or something. I think Brian asked in the Discord, who was your early, draft crush? And Zay Flowers was mine. It took a little bit of a hit with the spot that he landed in, but as things have kind of gone on, I've actually grown some more to like that position. I think that offense is going to pass more this year. I think Zay Flowers fits what Lamar Jackson likes to do. I think Zay Flowers is going to be a great player for years to come. So I'm with you on that. Starting roster, like you mentioned, is really good. You got Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs in your starting roster, and then you got Debo Samuel as a receiver 3. You can't really beat that. I like ETN. I don't like the DeAndre Swift one. I think that's going to be a full-blown 3-headed monster there. And, I'm not sure how much Swift's going to be used. We just assumed when he got traded there that it was going to be the Miles Sanders role. I'm not so convinced anymore. So I do think there's going to be a little bit of struggle there.
Why is that? Why do you think he won't fill into the Sanders role?
I don't think he can hold up to it. And I don't think that they think that he can do that. I think the fact that you've heard some glowing stuff about Gainwell and, they've talked up Penny a little bit. I think that they see it as a full 3-headed monster. And they've kind of been that way before. Even when they had Miles Sanders up until last year, it was basically a 3-headed monster. We kept saying, Sanders gets 5 yards per carry. Why can't he get more touches? And last year was the first year they actually gave him more touches. But I don't know if Swift is going to be that guy. But I do like on the bench there, Brian Robinson, my co-host on the show that's usually on this time at night. On Wednesday nights, actually, is Brian Robinson. He loves him. He's going to be, I think, a volume guy. He won't be efficient, but he will be volume. The Commanders will run the ball quite a bit, and I think he will benefit from that. Brian, you had this team kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum here. What are your thoughts here? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it might be one of those, death of 1,000 paper cuts thing again. I mean, Dak and Deshaun are kind of slipping in my dynasty rankings. I definitely am lower on Etienne than a lot of folks. It sounds like Shane as well.
You love Bigsby, right?
Yeah, and I'm not one of those people who thinks that Bigsby is better than or is going to outproduce Etienne, although I think there's a chance. I think Etienne is nowhere near as elite as people think. And
Brian, do you know
I think Bigsby is going to eat into Etienne's touches, especially the high value touches, a lot more than the Etienne truthers think. And so that explains part of it. Swift, I agree. It's murky there. I used to love Swift. I was a unapologetic Swifter. He was my dynasty RB2 at one point. Now he's like my dynasty RB23. That team threw like an NFL low to the running backs as far as targets go. Okay, they didn't have a guy like Swift, but let me see you do it. Otherwise, one of the reasons he's not going to have the Sanders role is because one of the reasons Detroit wanted to get rid of him is because he can't really run the ball. Like, he's good. Like, he'll beat you out to the edge, but as far as like instincts and like, hitting the hole and finding a crease and, coaches just like, they hated him there. They couldn't rely on him to do the right thing. A lot of his touches came in ways where how can I put it? Like, the defense was expecting X and they did Y with Swift, and that's why he performed well there, like on a per touch basis.
Yeah, there's a reason they gave Jamal Williams so many goal line carries, because Swift was not good at it.
I've already talked about being super low on Debo, I think, relative to market. Let's see, Brian Robinson, I do like, a little bit. I think he will be better this year than he was last year, but he's essentially discount Najee. Raheem Mostert, like, I did these rankings before the Wilson injury and all that, but he's still Raheem Mostert. He's still fairly one-dimensional and 31 years old. Like, I do like Bateman. I'm probably have a little more optimism on Bateman than some other folks do. But there's also a lot that remains to be seen with him and his foot and the target share there. I'm probably I like Flowers, but I'm probably lower than market on him. No need to have Justin Ross or a second tight end on this team. So, like, all in all, again, it's just a matter of like a bunch of little things pile up, and it's like, I wouldn't want to take over this team,
Fair enough. All right,
Brian, do you know what the suckiest thing for me this offseason has been? Is being an ETN truther and a Bigsby truther.
You can't be both. It's like being a Commanders fan and a Dallas Cowboys fan. You just can't do it. You got to pick a side here.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't, because they're my favorite team now, so I'm just happy.
All right, let's get to number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5 team ranked as high as 3, as low as 8, and it is Armed Rodgery. And Brian, this is your team here.
Yeah, so you've got Travis Kelce, who's like a difference maker at the position. You got a pretty good quarterback duo with Burrow and Russ. I think you lack sort of a solidly elite wide receiver option, but there's plenty of upside in some of the wide receivers you do have. And again, like our friend who had Waller, Kelce is essentially now your wide receiver 1, and a difference maker at the position, an advantage that other teams don't have at that position. So he can offset some of that. I think you have too many bench wide receivers, and some of them are, and I think not enough bench running backs, because you have too many bench wide receivers. And I am definitely not a Pacheco guy. You get bonus points though for having no defense kicker or tight end on your bench. So, Burrow and Russ quarterbacks, Mixon, Madison, and Pacheco are the running backs. Lockett, Christian Watson, Judy, Burks, Pittman, Tony, Dubs, and Mooney are the wide receivers. Kelce, the tight end. The keepers were Burrow and Kelce. I need you to add running back depth and possibly also maybe like improve the top end wide receivers. Maybe you can't do both. If Watson hits the ceiling, then he's your wide receiver 1. I would move a couple of the wide receivers and or maybe tier down from Kelce, because you could possibly get so much for him to do some of that. And then also, now that I know you can mix in picks, I'd like you to shift some of the numbers of those wide receivers and turn them into running backs. I just want to go through your wide receivers real quick. Lockett, constantly undervalued, but he's Tyler Lockett. He's like 31 years old. JSN's there now. He's going to be a wide receiver 2, and that's about it. Watson, I like him. He's a type of talent that I bet on in Dynasty, and I lean into that kind of ceiling. But there's definitely a world in which that goes wrong. Judy, he's going to be hurt the first few weeks. He's, people have said he's a head case. We're still waiting for him to break out. Some data shows that he's overrated as a route runner, which people were saying he's a great route runner. Burks, see my comments on Watson. Kadarius Toney. Romeo Doubs, he'll be a solid flanker type, and he'll get some targets, but really Watson and Jaden Reed are going to be the wide receivers you want there. Mooney's interesting, right? Because I think he can be solid in a higher pass volume offense, and his contract is up, and they kind of have his replacement in-house already with 4th-round pick Tyler Scott. He's a guy that might get traded at the trade deadline. So maybe hold on to him and see if he does get traded somewhere, and then maybe there's a value spike there. So all that to say, like, your wide receivers are kind of flat, right? So I want to see you add depth running back and then maybe add to the top end of your wide receivers.
Yeah, that's kind of what I saw with this team as well. Like you look at Travis Kelce, and he's obviously probably their best player on the team as far as the positional scarcity. But the rest of the team, the rest of the players are just kind of middle of the road. There's no guy.
There's no stud.
There's no stud outside of Kelce, obviously,
and Burrow.
Yeah, those are your two. But your skill spots, your receivers and your running backs, you just got kind of some guys. So my thought is, and I'm kind of in the same line with Brian, is once you got a ton of receivers on your bench that could pop, Burks, Toney, Dobbs, even Mooney can have a pop game. Christian Watson. When that happens in the season, I think I'm trying to move them, and maybe you package a 2-for-1 and you go out and get a stud, a running back or whatever. Get 2 of those guys off your roster. That's my thought, because your offense is very kind of boring. You're not going to have, like, outside of Kelce, none of those guys can win you a week with a game. I don't see it. I guess
Lockett. Yeah, Lockett is the only one that I think can win you a week, and Christian Watson.
Yeah, if Christian Watson hits his ceiling, like Brian mentioned, if he has the game he had last year, but I don't know how well he's going to do with Jordan Love. He's kind of dependent on Jordan.
And there's a comment in the chat about questionable drafting. I would agree. Like, from a roster construction perspective, this person pounded wide receiver when they should have pounded
running back.
Contingency upside running backs and pass catching running backs. Like, you're better off with Ty Chandler, Jerome Ford, and Keontae Ingram than you are with Kadarius Toney and Romeo Doubs.
Yeah. Good point. Anything else you want to say here, Shane, before we move on?
No, I'm based on his comments and his professed love for running backs, I'm surprised that Brian had them at 3, to be honest. I think kind of what you guys said is why I had them where I did, where it's like there's not a stud on this team. They're good. It's a good, solid team, but I don't think they'll make any noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's tough when your studs in a 1-quarterback league is your quarterback, and when your tight end is your other stud. It's a tough way to win a game. All right, let's get to number 4. Number 4 team ranked as high as 3 and as low as 5, and it is Company Man. And Shane, this is your team.
Yeah. Okay, I couldn't remember if I had muted myself or not. Sorry. This is a solid team. QB1, Patrick Mahomes. Like, I love that. Then you got Saquon and Gibbs. I think that's a really good 1-2 punch at running back. Hopkins, I'm not the biggest guy. He's kind of old. Don't know what he can actually still do. Now, his numbers in Arizona post-suspension and pre-injury were pretty good, but I don't know if the quarterback play is going to be anything near that, because, like, I have no idea what to do with Tannehill in any format. I'm super high on Calvin Ridley. At one point pre-suspension, he was my dynasty wide receiver 3. He's obviously dropped because he hasn't played in basically 2 years, but I still think the talent is there from everything we've seen. Dallas Goedert's an upper echelon tight end that doesn't really get talked about that way, but he should. Marquise Brown, I think, has a huge area for volume. We saw what his numbers were like without Hopkins in the beginning of last year. I don't know if it'll be as close to the same thing, but I don't really care who the quarterback is. They don't have anyone else to throw to, in my opinion, that's worth their salt. Then you've got McManus at kicker, Browns defense. Okay, great. Kirk Cousins is a great QB2, but with this team and having Mahomes, you don't need him. Alvin Kamara, after suspension, is a great RB3. You've got Devin Achane, who I like, especially from kind of a keeper dynasty perspective. Chuba Hubbard, you could probably cut. Honestly, I don't know how much of a role he's going to have in Carolina. Michael Thomas, if he can stay on the field, is a great wide receiver 4. Odell, despite my personal dislike for him, that's another story for another day, has kind of seen what we've seen as a offseason renaissance. So I like that for a what's the word I'm looking for? A value wide receiver 5 or flex. And then I like Cole Kmet, but with Goddard, you don't really need him. But this team is just like, it's solid from top to bottom. Like, I really like every single player on this team except for Chuba Hubbard. Like, I get why every player on this team is on this roster and how you constructed it, and see a pretty easy path, I think, for you within the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a good call, and I agree. And I think he's got some good pieces on the bench that could pop. You mentioned Kamara, having a suspension, but he will come back, and hopefully he will be a good enough running back to plug into his lineup. Marquise Brown, early in the offseason, I was really high on him. I think cutting Colt McCoy kind of soured me a little bit on Marquise Brown, only because I feel like the Cardinals are trying to tank without actually saying, publicly that we're tanking.
I do not understand it, though. Kyler Murray's contract for next year is absolutely egregious. There is no way in hell.
Everybody's saying tank for Caleb, and I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
No, that you. I would actually prefer you to talk because my throat hurts. But
okay,
that's where I was going with that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's saying tank for Caleb, and it's like, have you seen the dead cap on this guy's contract?
It's $80 million.
It's unmovable. Like I really highly doubt that happens. Whether they trade the 101 for like a boatload or draft Caleb and trade him or whatever. I would, if there was odds out there, I would bet against Caleb being because you could probably get pretty good odds. I would bet against Caleb being the Arizona quarterback.
Yeah, I would say that the trade option would probably be what they were looking to do because you're right. I mean, Kyler Murray is not going to go anywhere. They can't move that contract. The thing with Marquise Brown that I'm a little nervous of, he kind of forced his way out of Baltimore because he wasn't happy getting enough targets. How does he feel about right now with them, trading away potentially their best quarterback at the time, and they're really not trying to win? They traded away a good defensive player, had some potential for a 7th round pick. If this team comes out and goes 0-5, 0-6, where does Marquise Brown end up? Where is he going to be throwing fits? Is he going to be faking injuries and not getting in the game? I'm a little nervous about him with this attitude. So I'm a little bit more sour on Brown than I was early on in the season. And maybe Clayton Tune or the other guy, I can't think, is it Dobbs?
They have Josh Dobbs now, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're going to be better than I think they will be, but I'm a little worried about the situation there with Marquise Brown. But outside of that, I agree with your analysis. It's a pretty solid team, top to bottom. It's got a good mix of young guys and some older guys. Patrick Mahomes fixes a lot of your mistakes. He's going to cover up a lot of stuff for you. So overall, I like this squad a lot. Anything you wanted to chime in with, Brian, real quick?
No, I'm going to push back on Chuba, but maybe I'll do that when I talk about Sanders on this next team.
All right, let's get to the next team.
Number 3
team ranked as high as 1 by Brian, as low as 7. And Brian, this is your team, and this Muff Divers.
Listen, this was really hard for me to rank this team number 1. First of all, like, you and the 2 boobs person need to grow up and get some better team names. 2, you have a bench kicker and defense. So tight end. I automatically wanted to put you so low.
That's probably why I ranked them where I did.
But I look at this team and I'm like, they have elite starting lineup. They have the best starters in the league. You've got 2 big upside quarterbacks who they're with their rushing are Konami quarterbacks. You've got the best starters in the league. Brees, I will admit, he'll be slow to start out because he's already saying that there's some cuts that he just doesn't trust himself making. He's not a full, year and a half away from the ACL injury yet, I don't think. Yeah. He's not a year and a half away. He's not even a year away yet. Aaron Rodgers, people say one of the reasons he reworked the contract was specifically to get a guy like Dalvin Cook there. So He's going to want to lean on Dalvin Cook. He's like, listen, I got 2 years left in this league. I want to win another Super Bowl. So Brees, unfortunately, will be slow to come out of the gate, but he's an elite young running back, and he's still, for me, a top 3 dynasty running back. And you've got a meh bench, especially because you have a kicker in defense, but you have great trade chips to address all of your needs, right? Like, so you have so quarterbacks are Lamar and Anthony Richardson. Listen, if Anthony Richardson hits, right, like he's a league breaker in a 1 quarterback league, so you could trade him or Lamar. Miles Sanders, I think people are sleeping on him a little bit this year. He's not super great. He's not elite, but he's going to have a 3-down role. I think they trust him there with that. I love Charb. I think the Charb and Kenneth Walker analogy is very close for me to the Bigsby and Etienne analogy I talked about earlier. Jerick McKinnon, he's old, but he's going to get he's going to catch some passes,
yeah.
And he's going to probably score some touchdowns on that offense. Your wide receivers are ridiculous. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and Chris Olave, right, as your top 3 wide receivers. And then Jacoby Myers, who, he catches a lot, he gets a lot of targets. So he's pretty decent. And then your tight end, you've got my dynasty tight end 1 and Kyle Pitts, who, even if he's like the 2nd target on the team below London, again, that hyper concentration is going to mean something. Evan Engram, I think he's a little buzzy. I think you could spin him off in a trade. You don't need a 2nd tight end on this team. So I would drop your kicker and defense on your bench. You don't need them. And I would either drop or trade Evan Engram. And with those 3 spots, I want you to get 2 running backs and 1 more wide receiver. However you want to work that. Because I think that's how I would tweak this team. And I think between the picks and the fact that Olave is your wide receiver 3 and things like that, you've got trade chips to or if somebody really loves Richardson, like the guy with the Purdy at quarterback, you might as well trade for Richardson. You've got trade chips to kind of paste over any holes that you have now. And so I looked at this team and I was like, I saw Lamar and Richardson and Brees and J. Jeff, and I was like, and Pitts, I would want to take over this team. This is a sexy team. So yeah, I really love this team. Just change the team name, please.
And I don't know if he was joking in the chat, but he said this team was auto drafted. I used to play on Yahoo. I don't anymore. I use Sleeper, but if Yahoo is now auto drafting teams this good, I might go back to Yahoo.
Yeah, right.
I've been told the AI is improved on auto drafting on some of those sites. So, who knows, right?
Yeah, because I know Yahoo used to be terrible when I used Yahoo back in the day, and this team is sexy. I mean,
mathematically, you're actually pretty good if you actually auto drafted. There's a whole thing about it that I can explain, but I can't explain it as well as the person. I'll show you the article later.
Fair enough. And Dwayne in the chat is talking about how we rank this team so high when he's got 2 defenses and 2 kickers and all that.
I ranked them 7 for a reason.
Yeah, well, that starting lineup though, that's what wins you games.
Yeah. The fact that he's got trade chips to paste over those 3 roster holes, that's fine.
Solid team.
You can trade Chris Olave and still start Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. Come on.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's get to team number 2. Maybe not. My drop doesn't want to work. All right, well, we'll just get to team number 2. I don't know what happened to my drop there. It's not going off. But
number 2.
Beautiful.
With the sore throat and everything, right?
That's why I was able to hit that octave.
Number 2 team ranked as high as 1 by Shane and as low as 6. It is Super Mario Crystal Ballin. And Shane, this is your team here.
Okay, this is a great team name. I love this team name. Very creative. Yeah, I mean, just starting from the top, Justin Herbert and Bijan Robinson is dynasty keeper gold. Herbert's a top 5, 6, 7, 8 quarterback, and he's 24, 25. I can't remember. He's got Kellen Moore coming in. He's going to be healthy this year. Like, I love Justin Herbert. And then you got the 101 Dynasty RB1, I think, for most people, in Bijan Robinson. And then your RB2 is Nick Chubb. Now, yes, he's getting long in the tooth for a running back, but that dude's one of the purest runners in the NFL. And on this screen it's on flex, but on the spreadsheet he's in the RB2 slot. And then Dobbins in the flex, or as your RB2, either one. I don't care. Flip those around. They're both great. I love Dobbins. Dobbins is really, really efficient. So, even if for some reason he doesn't get a ton of volume, he's always been really, 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 really efficient with his touches. And so I love that about him. And then wide receivers, you stacked with Keenan Allen with Justin Herbert. Perfect. Jahan Dotson, flag plant. I have been all in on Jahan Dotson. It's been pissing me off that people have been taking him a round earlier than I was planning to, and that was a round early from ADP. Jahan Dotson's going to be freaking good. I think on the Podathon, someone mentioned, it was actually Kyle, mentioned how for every 180 yards, a player is projected to score one touchdown. And Jahan Dotson blew that number out of the water because of how many touchdowns he scored. I think his yards are going to skyrocket. His touchdowns may go up to 10 because he scored 7 last year. But this kid is so freaking good. So I am perfectly fine with him being your wide receiver too. You got TJ Hawkinson, who's probably tight end 3. You've got Tank Bigsby, who we all know I love. Brandon Cooks is criminally underrated typically. Sky Moore has a ton of upside. Deontay Foreman, You've got Jeff Wilson obviously sitting there on IR. Move him to IR if you guys have that and go pick somebody up. Use your roster slots to your advantage. Quentin Johnston, I'm not a Quentin Johnston guy, but you've got the obviously potential stack with Herbert if he does hit, and he can be your wide receiver 3 or your flex in this wide receiver. And Tank Dell's a guy who is kind of, I still think, a sleeper. I think Tank Dell has the potential to be really, really good. If you do bench Jeff Wilson or move him to IR, I almost would go replace him with, it'd be a wide receiver or running back. It would just depend on who's available. I think you're kind of set at running back with Bijan, JK, Chubb, and Tank. So you don't necessarily need it, in my opinion. So I would go for another receiver. But yeah, I absolutely love this team. Tons of upside, I think.
Yeah, it's a very solid roster, and I'm with you with Dotson. I live in Washington, D.C., so I get to hear all the good things about him in camp and how him and Howell have a great connection. And Terry McLaurin is almost guaranteed to at least miss that first week, if not 2, with the turf toe. If he plays, he'll be a shell of himself. So Dotson, even more wheels up.
And they have Arizona in week 1.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to have a monster game, in my opinion. Sky Moore even got a little bit of a value boost just recently with the news that they came out and said that Justin Ross and Rashee Rice are going to be quote unquote package receivers, which means they won't be starters. Kadarius Toney is supposed to be healthy for week 1, but who knows how long he'll last when he gets in there. So Sky Moore is the de facto
4 snaps.
Yeah, exactly. He's the de facto receiver 1 in that offense, and they can't throw every pass to Travis Kelce. They have to go somewhere else. So Sky Moore, being on the field with Patrick Mahomes is never a bad thing. So having him as your receiver, 4 or 5, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I love that. Justin Herbert, I think, has the upside to be the QB 1.
Yeah.
So that's, definitely a good thing there. You mentioned the stack with Keenan Allen. Never been a big touchdown guy, Keenan Allen, but he's going to be a solid week in and week out.
Target hog.
He definitely is, and he'll give you enough points with those receptions to make up for the lack of touchdowns that he has. Brian, I'm gonna go to you. Give me some of your thoughts on this squad here. What are you seeing?
Well, I think I want to instead maybe address Dwayne's question about the ranking that other team third that had the 2 kickers and the 2 defenses. I hope part of my answer about the fact that they have trade chips answered that question. So here's the thing. So that's essentially the Evan Ingram spot, the second kicker, and the second defense are his bottom 3 roster spots.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so you're saying essentially, that I should be judging the team by the bottom 3 roster spots. So first of all, the trade chips. Second of all, the bottom 3 roster spots. Third of all, as much as I do preach that, like, I like running back depth and things like that, at the same time, with rosters that are small like this, depth generally becomes less important because the waiver wire pool is better, right? So, you may say, oh, look, he's carrying a second kicker, well, if Jeff pulled up the waiver wire right now, I'd probably give you 10 guys that I could, replace those kickers, defense, and Evan Ingram with, that I'd be super happy with, and I'd still rank that team highly. So and also, again, we say it at the top of the show, but I think sometimes people forget along the way. We're ranking these teams based on not necessarily like how they'll finish or how quote unquote good they are. We're ranking them in the order in which we would want to take them over, right? And so when I see a team with J. Jeff and Pitts and Lamar and Anthony Richardson and Olave and CeeDee Lamb, like, my pants get tight. I want to take over that team.
Yeah, 100%. So any thoughts on this team here, Brian?
Yeah, I just think I love like Herbert. I love. My bold prediction on Dynasty Fever is going to be that he's going to be the QB1 this year. Chubb, really good, but again, he's a 28-year-old running back. Keenan Allen, again, you've got an aging guy there as your starter. I'm lower on Hawk than a lot of people are. Like, if you look at the numbers, they're just like he's getting there on volume. Like his points per game didn't really go up that much from Detroit to Minnesota, and he had a couple spike games with some weird touchdown efficiency that he's not going to be able to match either this year. Love Dobbins this year, love him. Again, I like Tank, but Foreman, Wilson, I like that you're putting in depth running backs. I don't know that I like them as much as I like some other depth running backs. And Brandon Cooks, Sky Moore, I like this. It was just one of those, like, also, like, as much as we kind of said, well, it's only a 1 QB league and all that, look at how many teams have a second QB, and not only that, but like a second good QB, and you've only got Herbert, right? So in a league where everybody's carrying a second quarterback, I don't know. I kind of would feel like I would want to address that. So yeah, I mean, nothing. And I'm not a Tank Dell believer, just whether or not you believe in Tank Dell, but nothing like egregious about this team. And like we said, it's kind of a flat league. I mean, I have them 6, so like, yeah, I mean, they're like a mid-tier team as far as like how I would want to take them over. But like we said, any team in this league can really push and win this year, except maybe the Purdy guy.
Absolutely. Just to go back on your Hockenson thing, I was going to cut you off and say exactly what you said about the spike games, because I'm a big DFS player, and there's a term or a statement that we use a lot of times where a guy quote unquote breaks the slate, where they just have these huge monster games, and typically a player will have one of those break the slate type games. And Hockenson had 2 of those. One when he was with Detroit, and then he got traded and had one with the Vikings where he, essentially had a 40, 50-point game, something like that, where he quote unquote broke the slate, and that really inflated a lot of his per game numbers. So good point on Hockenson. And Shane, I see you over there raising your hand. What do you want?
I was raising my hand because I was trying to be polite to the teacher. I just made a glaring realization for this league. 1, Sam Howell is still on waivers. 2, Bryce Young is still on waivers. And 3, CJ Stroud is still on waivers. So this guy, for example, because Brian mentioned it for this team specifically, can put Jeff Wilson on IR and then go pick up one of those guys, or just cut Tank Dell and go do it, because I think those guys would bring this team a little more value. And then the guy that has Brock Purdy, cut Brock Purdy and go pick 2 of those guys up.
Yes. All the Brock Purdy hate, guys. I don't know if I'm going to invite y'all back on any of these POPs.
Again, he's great for real football.
Fair enough.
But not fantasy.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's get to the next team here, and it is the number 1 team. Let's hope my drop works.
Number 1. Number 1.
Number 1 team, surprisingly, was not ranked by anybody at number 1. It's just the overall became the number 1 team. It was ranked as high as 2 and as low as 4, and it is Stairway to Evans. And Brian, this is your squad.
Yeah, and so, the listeners, viewers might be saying, well, how can this team be number 1 if they were ranked 2 and 4? So it's the highest average, right? And so when you only have 2 rankers, that's going to affect things differently than like some other shows where we might have 3 or 4 with like, big leagues.
Exactly.
And so that affects it too, right? So it might be funky. So for example, the Muff Divers, they were 3rd, but I ranked them 1 and Shane ranked them 7. Right. So that's, whatever kind of they had the 3rd highest average. The average was 4. So if we brought in a 3rd ranker that had some other kind of opinion, that might tweak things. Right. So just wanted to also note that. So Stairway to Evans, pretty good. I'm not one for the pun names. I've just never done that. Like they're so popular, but like whatever. Okay. So I like them. One of the reasons I didn't put them number 1 was like, listen, Fields could talk about breaking slates. Field could break fantasy this year, but he also could
break the Bears.
Well, I'm not as low on him as some other people are, but he's like of the 8 quarterbacks I really trust in Dynasty at this point. He's like the 8th. You know what I mean? And Daniel Jones, he's creeping up for me, but like, I would want my QB. I would want both. Those are QB2s for me for the most part, except for Fields. Like I said, he's kind of like that last QB that I trust. So the QB room. I hate saying room. Why did I do that? Isn't really to me as good as the person I ranked number 1. Eckler, very good, but aging with the new offensive coordinator. Eckler could take a hit here. They like to push it downfield. As much as Kellen Moore, his philosophy is aggressively take what the defense gives you, and what the defense gives you can sometimes be, checkdowns. At the same time, if you look at Eckler's target share in games that he played with Allen, with Williams, and with Allen and Williams, like it consistently goes down. So that's something to keep in mind. And you add, QJ into the mix. I don't love him, just like Shane doesn't love him, but he's in the mix. So Eckler's a faller for me.
They named Josh Palmer the wide receiver 3 today.
Well,
I know but
yeah,
just something to munch on.
Yeah. James Cook, I'm kind of a Cook skeptic. I'm not a believer that he's this 3 down back. I've never liked him as much as other people do. I think he will improve this year, but he will not improve to, I think, where people are saying. Cooper Kupp, even before the whole re-injury, I was like, I don't want the 31-year-old to be my wide receiver 1 in a keeper or dynasty, although it matters probably a little more in dynasty, and here we are with a re-injury. Amon-Ra St. Brown, target hog, but if it's half PPR and not full PPR, which I think we're right, yeah, that matters. That matters, right? Because he's much better for PPR being the target hog that he is. He probably will have some positive regression in touchdowns, right? Like he was tackled inside the 5 like 8 times or something last year, right? It's one of the reasons why Jamal Williams had so many touchdowns, right? So he'll probably have some positive TD regression, but at the same time, he's outkicked his coverage as far as the archetype that he is of the wide receiver. He's benefited from, Jared Goff being a low ADOT passer and also not having a great supporting cast around him and a team that didn't want to use Hawkinson. Now you have a team who's over the moon about Laporta and Gibbs. Montgomery is better than Williams and a better pass catcher than Williams. Jamal, that is. I like Jameson more than some people do. He's going to be there. I think he can do more than be the deep threat. All this to say, like, Amon-Ra is great. Like, he's a top 10 dynasty wide receiver for me, but, like, he's probably the one in the top 10 that I'm the most worried about. Andrews, love him. You got your tight end 2, boom. I mean, the tight end 2 essentially in Dynasty. So love it. He could push for the tight end 1 this year. That offense is going to take a step forward. Godwin, I'm lower on him than a lot of people. He's a faller for me on tomorrow night's episode of Dynasty Saturday Night 5. You can tell. You can hear why. I think you have mostly good starters here. You have a touch of age, I think. You've got 2 rushing quarterbacks. It's good that they add rushing, but I don't think either of them is like a QB1 that I love. You got a pretty good bench. You don't need that second tight end, but at least you don't have a kicker and defense, which is good. Gibson, I think, could really be a surprise for people this year. He's kind of a buy for me. The rookie wide receivers you have on your bench might be slow to start, and you're relying – I shouldn't say relying, but you have 3 of them, Addison, JSN, and Hyatt, right? I would want to see one of them not be a rookie. Rookies start slow and get better as the year goes on. And if the Tampa offense goes tits up and Godwin isn't producing the way people want, I don't know. I would maybe try to spin off one of those rookies and also get rid of Schultz somehow. So you've got Fields, Daniel Jones, Eckler, James Cook, Elijah Mitchell, and Gibson. Kupp, Amon-Ra, Godwin, Addison, JSN, and Hyatt. Andrews and Schultz are your tight ends. Essentially, I want you to have one less rookie wide receiver, especially now with Kupp hurt. I want you to have solid, more reliable. I'm usually a ceiling guy. I think you need a little bit of floor in this situation. And also, there's really no need to have Schultz. I want you to turn that roster spot into a running back. Otherwise, like a lot of teams in this league, a solid team and one I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind taking over.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the receivers there being the young guys on the bench, and you already have Kupp injured, and you could see exactly how hard that lineup's getting ready to fill when you start hitting bye weeks. If you have bye weeks and injuries, and you're putting in Jackson Smith and Jigba, Addison, I love all the receivers he has, but it's going to be tough as rookies to step in there and be producers in fantasy.
If you see in the chat there, he's made a trade. They traded Hyatt for Deion Jackson, and you should have gotten more for Hyatt. I'm not a Hyatt guy, and I think you should have gotten more for Hyatt because he's buzzy and was catching some long touchdowns in preseason. With the JT news, Deion Jackson's like the 3rd guy I want in that backfield probably. Zach Moss will stumble his way to volume production, and Evan Hall's got the 2-way skill set that probably is desirable. Deion Jackson's like fairly one-dimensional pass catching back. I like having pass catchers, but in a league with this roster size, like there's almost no reason to roster a guy like Deion Jackson when you could trade Hyatt probably for something better.
Yeah, that's a good call. And they've already announced he's the starter week 1, but that's only because Zach Moss isn't ready. As soon as Zach Moss is ready, he's the starter. So you might have a 1-week starter, and then you're gonna have
okay. So it was a waiver. So he dropped Hyatt and got Deion Jackson. Okay. I mean, Jaleel McLaughlin would have been a better waiver pickup than Deion Jackson.
Shane, anything you want to mention here on this team?
Just that I think I'm agreeing with Brian where I'm lower on Fields and lower on James Cook, and that's why they ended up being at 4. That combined probably with a little bit of the age. If I were to trade a rookie wide receiver, I don't know. I may try and capitalize on the Jordan Addison camp hype and people thinking that the Vikings offense is going to be this big explosive thing, which it probably will be. But I think JSN is the best receiver, and you just got to play the long game with him, so don't get impatient with there. So I would trade Addison before I trade JSN.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was looking at too, because trading the rookie receivers could make sense, but I'd imagine he didn't spend a high draft pick on them and could keep one of them for pretty cheap. So you got to decide which one of those guys you want to keep.
If I'm not mistaken, week 1, Minnesota plays Tampa Bay.
That's correct.
Now, we could say positive game script, it's going to be a Madison game. I could also say first half, they're just going to be pass happy as they always are, run up the score on Tampa. And Addison's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to maybe look good after that week 1. Might be a good sell. You never know.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, they do play Tampa.
Yeah, good call. All right, guys, that wraps the podcast up. I want to thank everybody that's in the chat, in the league in general. Thank you for your purchase. I know we've done this league a couple times now, at least the second year, if not the third year we've done this league. So thank you once again. We hope to see you next year. Before we leave, though, I want to give these guys one last chance to plug what they got going on. Give them your Twitter handle. We'll go to you first, Shane.
Yep, you guys can follow me on Twitter at FFShaneB. Podcast is at FFRZ Redemption. And I'm a ranker at RotoHeat, so check us out at rotoheat.com.
Good stuff. Brian?
Yeah, at FFJunkie_ on the Twitter X, Elon's plaything, whatever you want to call it. And at Dynasty Fever Pod is my other podcast. Tomorrow night, 7:30 Eastern, is the Going for Two podcast I do called Dynasty Saturday Night 5. Rankings and some articles on goingfor2.com. And you can always heckle me on Twitter and with, tweets and DMs and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Good stuff. As always, guys, you can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. And if you're not already in our Discord, you want to go get in there. We got a lot of activity going on. You can find the Discord link in my Twitter profile, or you can go to goingfor2.com. In the bottom right corner, there's a little Discord logo. You can click on that, join the Discord. We got some great quote unquote pros in there, experts. If you want to call them experts. Shane's in there, so I can't really say experts. But yeah, there's some great guys in there that know a lot of stuff. So if you want to get in there for the season and ask questions, that kind of stuff, it's a great place to be. And again, thank you for your purchase. And if you wanted to get in on that promo, that promo code is earlybird24, and the URL is goingfor2.com/PLP. For Shane, for Brian, I'm Jeff, and we hope to see you next year.